Before we get started on this interview that I'm really excited for you to watch, I do just want to say that it was recorded before the announcement that June Spencer, who played Peggy Woolley, has sadly died. Our thoughts are with her family, her friends, and of course her Archers family too. We're all about the Archers. I'm Philippa and I'm with Quentin today because we are absolutely thrilled to welcome to the podcast today the one and only David Troughton, who plays Tony Archer.
Hello.
David, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, welcome. It's a great honour to be here. Thank you.
The honour's all ours, David. David, I must ask you this. Have you ever had or continue to operate a train set that you care obsessively about?
I used to have a train set. Yep. I had it was 00, I think. It was a small one. They brought out miniature versions of the 00 gauge. And yes, I had a lovely train set. And my brother managed, I don't know where it went, but my brother managed to ploin it. And he has a collection of clockwork trains and my train set somewhere. So, yeah, I used to have one. I loved it. It had smoke coming out of the front.
Oh, sweet.
Actually, I had a friend in where I live, and he converted his attic and made this extraordinary model railway. It was brilliant. Yeah.
So were you able to advise the script writers when they were looking at those scenes?
I had to do a bit of research on when I think Tony got a present of a special 349 whatever train, and I had to do a bit of research on it just to know what I was doing.
We need to get our facts straight because obviously Tony Archer has been a part of the Archers for a very long time, and you took over the role from Colin Skip.
Colin wanted to retire, and but they had a big storyline coming up for Tony Archer. So they thought, well, we can't actually just, get rid of him. So we'll have to recast, which has been done before. I mean, it wasn't a precedent. That had already been set. Yeah, so Sean O'Connor, I got a phone call from him one day, and he said, "Do you listen to the Archers?" And I said, "Well, when I'm going up north, probably I'll put the radio on a Sunday and listen to the omnibus," which I think a lot of people do. And he said, "Well, how would you feel?" And I had a thought about it, and I thought, well, why not? Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you did. David, I have a set of characters whom I'm very fond of, I stress this, and who I affectionately refer to as as dull but decent. And these include Roy, Neil, Rex, Alistair, Ed, Robert, David, and Tony. They're all blokes, if it's realised. Do you agree with me that they are the bedrock of Ambridge?
Well, they are the farming side. I mean, Tony is the farming side, I think, of Ambridge. He is a farmer through and through. I mean, when you watch these farming programmes now, you realise the amount of work they do. But through that comes this absolute love of what they do as well. And I think that's Tony. I mean, he grumbles, he grouches, and he's getting old. Blimey, he had a heart attack and he's been attacked by a bull. And
Natasha.
A survivor. And he's rather like me, a bit of a grumpy old man now. I think the older you get, the more you're allowed to grumble a bit. I think.
Yeah,
I would say, people might think him as boring, but there is an energy in playing a boring character. You can't just be boring, because that would be boring. So to play a boring, you've got to have the energy of actually displaying your boringness.
Well, that's why I always couch it with the word decent, because I think all those characters are fundamentally decent characters.
Yes, he's very old-fashioned in his views, and his attitudes, and he's always surprised, I think, by the modern way. I wasn't involved in that, but when Helen had artificial insemination for her son, he just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And that was one of the scenes I listened to when I took over, because I did do a lot of listening to Colin. I didn't want to imitate him. I just wanted to get his rhythms and how he thought. And that was one of the scenes where he goes in and sees the baby for the first time.
And you mentioned, David, some of the memorable big scenes in Tony's life, the heart attack, the Otto the bull, but also something that was really significant for me was those times when Tony had to take Jack to see Rob, and these sort of monitored visits when Rob was, well, Helen was still in prison and Rob was lording it over. And you could just sense, this awful tension in Tony. It was so brilliantly played. Is that something that is one of the memorable scenes for you, or are there other scenes?
Well, that whole storyline was memorable, I think. I mean, not only did it make the press, and brought out controlling as a very common thing. People would come out of the woodwork and said, yeah, this happened to me. But what I liked about it was such a slow burn. It happened over 2 or 3 years, really. And to see that far ahead was, I thought, a brilliant move, because things in stories can dramatically happen too quick, I think. But because The Archers is a week by week, forever type thing, you can plan that far ahead. And I just thought it was a wonderful storyline, really, really good, and so real, and it affected so many people in so many different ways.
Well, I mean, talking of memorable scenes, when Rob came back recently, I thought Rob's baptism scene was a very, very memorable scene, because Tony was consumed by utter rage, wasn't he? He was determined, almost, he sensed, to get physical with Rob and the rest of his family, but chose in the end to have this sort of silent contempt, didn't he? Which I thought made it even more powerful. Did you agree?
The feelings he had for him, you can get intrusive thoughts, really bad, intrusive thoughts about what you would like to do to people. And in the end, though, because you are a human being who has morals, and, you think, well, I cannot feel like this anymore. It's going to destroy me. And that's what he wants. Those are the sort of people that they're like black holes. They absorb everyone else's energy. And you suddenly realize you're caught up in that. And to actually break out and just accept what he was Tony's way of doing it, I think. Yeah.
And as you say, it sort of set him free, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it was cathartic for him and it happened in a church and, and all that. But I'm not saying that Tony's religious, but that sort of atmosphere and the surroundings can affect what you think.
I do worry about Tony and who he has to talk to, because he's got some strong women in his life, but
he's solid. He's solid.
Yes, okay. Let's say it as it is.
This were awful to him when he was young. He had a drunk father, or a stepfather. He had a horrible upbringing, I think.
Peggy wasn't very nice to him, was she?
No, she wasn't. And June's so lovely. Yes, so he had a lot of weight to bear on his shoulders when he was growing up, and he was a bit of a naughty lad too, wasn't he? Bit of a Jack the Lad, until Pat calmed him down, and she who proposed to him,
But who does Tony have to talk to about things? Do you know what I mean? Like over a pint, he doesn't seem to. Yeah.
I mean, he'd love to have had his son John.
Oh yes,
That's the problem. He can't really ever talk to his son Tom.
No,
really, and that's a sad thing.
yeah.
It's great that my actual son's playing, so we have a good understanding of that.
But I think in some ways, the scenes I particularly enjoy are the reflective scenes between the long-established characters, and I love it when you have a reflective scene, say with David or Brian, because then they've thrown a lot of sort of old Archer's history, and it's two long-established characters looking back on things, and they have great scenes. So Tony does occasionally get to chat to these characters, but not enough, perhaps.
No, I don't think so. As you say, he is surrounded by women. Pat's very strong. Recently, she went against his wishes.
yes, yes, with George.
With George. But it turns out she's probably always right. And the annoying thing. But, yes,
David, you and I need to have a chat about this. Women are always right, damn it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's a good point that he hasn't got. His mother is, he's always pleased, isn't he, when she gives him any praise at all. I mean, he's like a little boy when...
I just wonder who he WhatsApps when he's had enough of the family. Is it Neil or...
He knows how to do what. We can just about do the mobile phone. Yeah, he's good on the computer, but WhatsApping is not for him, I don't.
Like just going back to Peggy, I mean, there was that awfully painful scene, wasn't it, when she recorded that 70th birthday tribute to him, and he was so hurt, wasn't he? He was distraught by it because it brought it all back for him.
That famous poem. They mum and dad, they don't mean to, but they do.
Yes.
And it lives with you all your life.
Yes.
Pat, I think, is maybe a mother figure too. He's not in awe, but he just needs a strong woman. It calmed him down. He was a bit of a lad, but he needs a bit of a push sometimes. But once he gets going, he's into it. Like, his hobbies, for heaven's sake. His trains, his car.
Yes.
Tractors.
Yes, we had that very interesting, uncomfortable time. I think it was at Christmas when Joy got interested in his car, and he, in all innocence, was just befriending her, needing a friend.
It was going to happen.
Yes. Dear, poor Tony. David, you mentioned about your son William, who plays Tom Archer. And I mean, I have to admit that Tom does drive us all slightly bonkers at time.
Yeah.
I'm reassured that you agree with that. That must be tricky, though, when it's your son as well.
No, it's fantastic because we're playing, completely opposite to what we are. It's great. He is so annoying, Tom.
Thank you.
He is so annoying.
Thank you.
And John would never have done that. But he never knew. I mean, he wasn't old enough to grow up, was he? It was, and that was the guilt too. Tony has this terrible guilt that they had an argument the night before John went out on the tractor because he said you hadn't mended a fence or something, and he went out and had that accident. So, why is Tom annoying? Tom is annoying because he's always trying to get his father to say, well done, I think, and to actually admit that he can do things. He's always trying to, impress his father with his schemes, and I'm going to do this. And it's a lovely written relationship. Yeah.
I thought they got really close when Tony was comforting Tom about reflecting on losing the child with Kirsty and feeling guilt about having children himself since. I thought Tony put a really protective arm around him.
He did. I mean, absolutely. There are moments in which you see that's the relationship they could have all the time. But then Tom will go and do something really stupidly annoying.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because that moment, Tom wasn't trying to impress Tony.
He was vulnerable.
Yes, so it ties in exactly with what you're saying.
Does William, your son, share any of the traits of your fictional son, Tom?
I don't think so, no. I mean, it's all acting.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they both but they both love playing cricket, is that true?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And don't get me started about the cricket, yes. Charles Collingwood, me and Wiggs sort of like cricket. And some of we have to say, no, you wouldn't do that. We wouldn't say that if you knew about cricket. So, yeah, we have to sort of come in sometimes.
David, you have this incredible pedigree with everything you've done, theatre, film, TV, but being in the Archers, I mean, can you remember the first day in the studio? When you
started? I was nervous as a kitten. You know, you think of all the history behind it, and then you go into the studio. I had been in the Archers before.
Oh.
Yeah, yes. Paul Greenwood, an actor who lives locally nearby, and I were phoned out of the blue. They needed someone to play a counsellor, and I don't know what Paul was playing, but I came in on a Sunday to record, and it was a council meeting or something. I can't even remember the name. Martin, was it? Martin, my name. But that was, about 6-7 years before.
Ah.
Yeah, so
it wasn't your first rodeo.
And the script editors said, there is a future Tony, if ever we need one.
It wasn't Sean then. Yes, he did. Yeah, I remember June being absolutely brilliant. She, sort of showed me the ropes, told me how you do this and don't worry about that. It was brilliant. It was lovely. Well, so was Pat. I mean, Pat lives locally as well. So we went for a meal, lunch, just to get to know you lunch before the recording, which was nice. That's what's so lovely about doing the Archers is the family feel to it all. You see someone, maybe one recording session, you might not see them again for 2 years. You might not, meet again. But when you do, it's always like you just carry on where you left off.
Yeah.
It's a really good atmosphere in the studio, and that's what I like. And also, the older you get, you don't have to learn it. That's a brilliant thing. I mean, lots of people now have iPads, and I can't really cope with that. So I'm still an old-fashioned script man, but the paper has changed, you see. This is the techniques of radio acting. Yeah. It used to be a non-rustly type paper, but now they just use normal paper, which is very rustly. So you have to be more careful about turning your script. Oh. Yeah. Just a little speech information.
Just picking up on that, I mean, you have a very impressive record as a stage actor, particularly for the RSC over the years. Does appearing in a radio drama bear any resemblance to acting on stage, or is it a completely different craft?
There are certain things that are the same. You're playing a character, and you have to get that character over. But with radio, of course, you've only got your voice to do it with. On stage, you've got your whole body to show what you're doing and feeling and Yeah, I mean, radio drama is an intimate form of what theatre's all about, really. But radio drama, even things apart from the Archers, the plays that happen on radio is the only place really where new plays are done every day. It's amazing. It's such a treasure trove of new talent, of new writers. It's really important. But actually doing it, it's very different because you have a microphone in front of you and you're playing to the microphone. So I often think when there are two of you in front of the microphone is the other person, not the person next to you playing the scene. Because if you turn away from the mic, you'll lose the voice. So you look at the microphone as if it was the character that you're playing. So that's very different. Yeah, very different.
Thinking about Tony in the future, obviously no spoilers, but just what you would hope for Tony. I mean, I do hope that Johnny returns soon from sailing around the world and Tony can actually enjoy his retirement a little bit more. But what would you hope for Tony in his future?
Well, I mean, Pat and Tony are getting old, aren't they? I mean, there are only so many jobs. I mean, that he can possibly do. I mean, because Johnny went, they were very overworked, weren't they? Probably his back problem will arise. What do I see? Well, I don't want them to emigrate or leave the country. Yes. That's what I don't want. Yeah. I'd like something major to happen, maybe. We're always saying that if things are going well for a family in the Archers, you don't get the episode.
Yes.
You only get when things are going wrong. So we all say, oh, yeah, well, I hope that doesn't happen. Yeah, I mean, people who've been in it for 40-odd years are still saying, oh, God, I've got 2 episodes this month. And you think, you've done it for 40 years and you're still... thinking, oh, lovely, I can do 2 more. Yeah.
Well, Natasha's bound to upset the apple cart, surely, when she takes over the tea room.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, she is a very strong lady. There, see, Tom has married a very strong lady. Tony married a very strong... It's obviously a genetic thing, I think.
But hopefully no more cowhides on the wall, Tony. From Tony, David.
I mean, can you imagine the disgusting... I mean, and then we talked about... It went into the realities of what happens down at the... horrible. They must have looked awful. Yeah,
that's when radio paints fantastic pictures, doesn't it?
They didn't have smell-o-vision as well. Yeah.
But again, just on what you said, David, it's interesting because Helen also married a strong person. I mean, obviously too strong and awful.
Well, Helen, I think, is a victim. She will always marry people who, I don't know, somehow. That's why Lee was so good for her, really. Yeah. That he was just normal.
Yes.
He had his problems, but he was, and maybe that's why it didn't work out.
Yeah, no,
maybe
you're right.
Needs. People are funny, aren't they, in who they choose as partners and why they do it, and there's a lot of deep psychological reasons, I think.
Well, David, talking about deep psychological reasons, we've got all the questions from our Facebook group. So prepare yourself for this. But we've got a lot of questions. No,
it's not.
No quiz.
If I get it wrong, I won't get it.
Right. Okay. So do rattle through these, David. But the first one comes from Tamsin. And she says, how do you prepare for taking over from an actor like Colin Skip, who has played your role for 46 years, as we've discussed? Do you make it your own, she asks, and is there an element of mimicry involved to start with?
Oh, he's covered everything there. Yes, I did a lot of listening. I read a lot about the character on the internet, but mainly I listened to. I didn't want to mimic him. I wanted to get his. He's got a very deliberate delivery, slowish, and you could say almost boring-ish. But as I said before, to play a boring character, you've got to have a bit of energy behind it. So yes, in the first instance, I would try and hear him in my mind as I was saying the lines. I didn't want to mimic him, but I just wanted to hear his timbre and everything. I think I've gone more away from that, not tried so much.
Yeah.
But now I am just playing myself, playing Tony. So I am the character. It says David Troughton is Tony Archer. So whatever I do, I am now Tony Archer, hopefully in people's minds. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, David, the subject of food in The Archers is very important to me. And Darcy asked the next question. Does Tony actually enjoy having soup for lunch every day?
Pretty regular, aren't they, meals?
Yeah.
I don't know whether they have breakfast, you see. I reckon he's out with the cows, or so maybe breakfast is missed. So lunch becomes really important. It's something to look forward to on those cold December days. Does he have soup every day? I would think so. Pack has got gallons of it. Gallons of it. She makes big batches and freezes it, I would think. Soup and a sandwich for lunch. I think that's their life, isn't it? Very regular, very, things happen every day the same.
Yeah. One of Tom's slabs as a sandwich. He's not very good at making sandwiches. Okay, Lauren wants to know, what has been the most interesting and enjoyable storyline that you have been involved in since taking over the role of Tony?
The bull one, I think, was good. Because he loved that bull so much, and then the bull just turned out to try to kill him. Which is, I mean, it happens on farm. The accident on farm is appalling. Health and safety, you can't really, have a proper health and safety because you don't know what animals are going to do. And of course, the whole Helen saga. I thought there was a Christmas where, what was it? I got a present, didn't I? A guitar.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And,
From Lillian.
That was quite Lillian, yeah. I do love the relationship Lillian and I have. Yeah. No, I think mainly it was because that was sort of just after I joined. That all started with Helen and Rob. I would say it was such a brilliant slow burn over the years.
Poor Tony, yes, he's been rejected by everyone, even his favourite bull. Even the bull rejected him. It's quite sad, really.
But he still went back. He still got him.
The next question is from Lizzie, who says, many people have hurt Tony or challenged him over the years. If you could have the last word, what would that last word be, and who would have to hear it?
Last word? To what?
Which character would you want? Do you want Tony to really say something? Maybe Peggy? Would you really want to speak his truth to Peggy?
I would, yes. Peggy, Rob, but he's dead now. And he sort of bottled that. Who else? Dustin, probably. Dustin, I'll tell him where to get off.
Very good, thank you.
Brian, yes, Brian. Although, they got together a bit when my sister died. But they've had their ups and downs. But I think Justin probably.
Thank you.
Okay, David. John asks, What's it like to have such an unpleasant daughter-in-law?
Oh, that's cruel. Marley and I worked at the RSC in 2000.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, when we were younger. Yes, so, yes, what's it like? Well, again, she's a strong lady, isn't she? And she doesn't, she just barges in there and says, this is what I think should happen. And I'm not sure Tony wants to stand up to her, really. I think he'd much rather have a quiet life and let Tom get on with it.
Oh, I love Natasha. I love the character. I think she's
Absolutely
much misunderstood.
Yeah.
But there we go.
And
Georgie.
she's Welsh, you see.
Yes, that beautiful
There's another
voice.
thing. Obviously, they're attracted to Welsh ladies, both of them.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Yes, gosh, we could write an essay on this. Anyway, Georgie asked, David, you have been in a lot of British institutions aside from the Archers. What other show, past or present, do you wish you could be in?
Oh, could be in. Oh, well, there was a big series in the 80s, would it be? War and Peace. They did War and Peace on BBC. And I was never in that. I'd love to have been in that because every other actor in the world. Me. Colin Baker was in it. I know that. I was sharing a flat with him then. So, what other series? Oh,
Downton?
Downton. Well, I'd like to be in a series that went on and on and on. Yes, definitely. I did a series called The Cafe on Sky Television, set in Weston-super-Mare, which I loved. It was such a gentle comedy. And we did 2 series. We had such fun on it, and it was axed. So I'd like that to have gone on, because I felt really, it was funny, but very gentle. Yeah, anything that would, have us repeat. I mean, I did ages ago, very beginning practice. That did 2 series, and then did a 3rd film, a Polish practice, very Polish practice. I'd like that to have gone on because the character was so enjoyable to play.
Yeah.
Robert Buzzard.
Did you pop up in Doc Martin at all? Doc Martin or?
No, never been in a Doc Martin.
Midsummer Murders? Surely.
Yes, I've done 2 of
Yes.
those.
Yes.
I played 2 characters. I was in the second one ever, and then about 8 years later, which they have a rule, you can't be in it until the number of years has gone by. I would be the only character to die being stabbed through the heart, apparently. Yeah. So people have told me.
Okay, we got one now from Heather. And Heather asks, has or will Tony ever get over being belittled by Peggy most of his life?
Probably not. No. In the story, yeah, he's just like a little boy, isn't he, that needs to be told, well done. And he's never had that in his life, really. And the times that she does say, oh, that's good, well done. He's absolutely euphoric. It's awful, really, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh.
I don't think he'll ever get over it. No.
Oh, Tony. And Claire says, Tony built a thriving family business, now in the hands of a second generation. He took his family from tenancy to ownership. He was one of the pioneers of organics who survived, but he doesn't seem to get much pleasure out of life. Poor Tony.
I think he does. I think he loves his grandchildren. He misses Johnny a lot, I think. He's never said, but he misses him. He misses John, the person that... so he's got his problems. He's probably... I mean, to have a heart attack and then survive, and then get get nearly killed by a bull. He is a survivor, and to be a farmer, you have to be. You have to accept that there are forces beyond your. You have no power over, like nature and crops and animals, and
Yeah.
So I don't think he's upset about his life. I think he's accepted what he is, and I think he's very happy with Pat, very happy indeed. And their 50th is coming up, isn't it? Their 50th anniversary. So they've been through thick and thin, but out the other side. And I think for Tony, that's good enough.
Yeah. Now, this question by Michael, I'm going to have to refer, Michael, to your previous answer. In fact, the answer to my first question to you, because he just merely asks, David, do you share Tony's enthusiasm for model railways? So, Michael, just refer back to David's first answer. So you ask the next question, then, Philippa.
Okay, yes, the answer to that is yes, I think. Yes. Paul says, now, with all the George and Alice storyline, David, there were a lot of us that were sort of shouting at the radio because there had been a similar-ish storyline going back in time. So the question, so Paul says, why did your whole family never mention the Tom Helen lying about the driver scenario while condemning George?
As the script writers.
Yes. Yeah.
We can only say what we're given.
Yeah.
It is the dark secret that no one talks about. Yeah, don't mention the war.
Yes.
Like that.
Okay, Rob's got a very simple question, David. What was it like growing up with Doctor Who? Because, of course, your father, Patrick, was the second Doctor Who.
He was. What was it like growing up with him? I didn't grow up with him. This is a simple answer. My brother wrote a very good biography of him, and he left in 55, basically, 1955. So we only saw him every week. We didn't grow up with him. So he had another family. Watching my father on television was the norm. Lots of people saying, oh, you must be so rich. You must be a millionaire. Your father's on the television, all those rather innocent remarks. Obviously watching him was a great thrill. And to get Doctor Who, which is rather sad, really, because the way they did it then, he worked for, 48 weeks in the year on Doctor Who. It was just pressure all the time. And in the end, I think it killed him, basically. The pressure of it, and he gave it up, and he was terrified always of being typecast. In those days, if you played one character for too long, you would never work again. But now, if you play a character too long, you always work again. It's completely changed. And so he was terrified that would happen. So he only did 3 years, I think. Yeah.
Am I right that you took on your father's role as the second Doctor Who in an audio play in 2011? Is that right?
In an audio play I did, but he was a robot.
Oh.
He wasn't the actual Doctor. So I thought that was once removed, so I could do that. I've read a lot of Doctor Who stories playing my father in the reading. But this was different. This was actually being the Doctor, but it wasn't, because it was a robot.
So is it a slight bittersweet experience for you? By the sounds of it, sounds like it.
No, now he's been gone a long time now, and I'm very proud of what he did. And I've always, when you go into it and reading my brother's biography of him, he was desperate. He was so nervous every time he performed. And he gave out this amazing, carefree, it's only pretend type thing. But physically inside, he was churning, which obviously didn't help either when he died.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was a great actor, I thought. A great actor. I saw him the other day, actually, in Richard III, the film, the Laurence Olivier film. He plays a small part role, but he was his stand-in. So if there was a long shot of Laurence Olivier, that would be my father, because Laurence Olivier directed it as well. So he'd need to see what a shot was like, be his stand-in. Yeah,
because even Laurence Olivier got afflicted by stage fright as well in the end, didn't he?
It can happen.
Yeah,
quite sudden too. I mean, I haven't done theatre now since before lockdown. So what it would be like to go back suddenly, I don't know. Because I did a lot just before lockdown. Yeah.
So the next question is from Sally, who says, when Tony was crushed and trampled on by his beloved prize bull Otto, did you think it was the end for Tony?
Well, I hoped it wouldn't, because I'd only just joined.
Yes, that year.
Yeah, I mean, we always joke, the whole cast always joke, oh dear, that's the end for you, mate, you know, you're going to get written out. Yeah, so I sort of knew there were going to be episodes where I was just lying attached to tube. Yes. I did
groaning.
One episode where I just breathed. When I think it was when Tom came to be by his bed.
Oh.
I was just going. So that was a good part.
At least you didn't have to talk to Tom.
Yeah. So, you hope that every storyline will keep you in the story rather than being your demise.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Nikki asks, Tony's endured a lot of trauma over the decades. Is he worried that Pat could suffer a cricket ball mishap next season?
Well, blimey. Don't get me on the cricket. My worry, obviously not, because I don't ever say anything about you think you're too old to do this.
Yeah.
You wouldn't dare.
No.
No, I obviously umpire, don't I think. Having tried to be in the team, but Pat overtook me and just became the star of the show. Who they play with women and men and boys and old people, I don't know. I don't know what their team look like.
It's the Ambridge magic once again.
It is.
The next question is from Laura. Seeing as Tom is played by your real life son William, does that mean that work doesn't really feel like work?
Doesn't at all, no. The best sort of acting work doesn't feel like work at all. That's my criteria for if I've enjoyed a job. I've been with the people, the whole play, and everyone was working towards the same end. And those are the sort of memories that you really enjoy. Because if you didn't enjoy acting, there's no point in doing it, because it is quite a tense, nerve-making profession, really. Learning lines, and don't get any easier learning lines. But to do it with my actual son, it's a great joy. Really good.
Another David says, please tell David I saw him playing a wonderful Caliban in The Tempest at Stratford some years ago. Could you ask him if he still does any Shakespeare, or does being Tony take up most of his time?
Well, as I said just now, I was at the RSC for 3 seasons before lockdown. I did 3 plays, Gloucester, King Lear, and then Titus Andronicus, playing Titus, and then doing Falstaff in Merry Wives. So, yes, I have played a lot of Shakespeare, which I love. I absolutely adore Shakespeare. And as I say, I haven't done theatre for 5 years now. So going back to it would be quite tiring. I'd have to get fitter than I am, I think, because it is quite exhausting.
Would you go back?
Pardon?
Would you go back to the stage?
Would I? Of course I would. Yeah, for the right thing, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
The next question is from Lee. I don't think it's Helen's Lee. I think
right.
it's a listener Lee, but who knows? Lee asks, will Tony ever really retire? He seems to be busier than ever holding the fort that is Bridge Farm.
Don't think he will. No, he'll always try and... For all the boringness of Tony, he is a bit of a control freak. He does like things done the way he wants. So it's very difficult to let go and to give it away. And I think he'll always be there. I mean, Brian, I think, had the same problem. Letting people take over. Of course, physically, the physical aspect of it, he could let go, but he'll still be involved in the farm. Hopefully.
Yeah.
But who knows?
And our penultimate question comes from Abby, and she asks, if you were stuck in a broken lift with Tony for an hour or more, which is crucial, I think, would you strike up a conversation with him? And if so, what would you talk with him about?
If I was in a lift with someone, well, you'd have to talk, wouldn't you? If you were stuck in a lift, you couldn't just sit there with Tony.
Yeah.
Yes. Tony wouldn't initiate the conversation. You would have to initiate the conversation. And then you'd find out he was a farmer, and you'd probably be bored a bit he'd probably tell you stories that you had no idea what he was talking about.
And trains and soup might come up as well, right?
Yes, trains and red cars and tractors.
Yes.
It could bore you to death about Fergies and whatever's. Yeah.
Well,
it wouldn't be for an hour.
Oh. Well, David, those are the questions from the Facebook group. Now, just finally, we do a thing that we call Pass the Parcel. So the last cast member we interviewed, which was Felicity, who plays Ruth Archer, we ask a question from them to ask you.
Oh, my heavens.
So prepare yourself.
A quiz. You said there wasn't.
There's no quiz.
No quiz.
There's no quiz. I promise you. It's just another question. And the question from Felicity Finch, who plays Ruth Archer, for you is, there have been several formidable women in your life. Peggy, Jennifer, Lillian, Pat, Helen, and dare I say it, Natasha. Who was or is the most formidable?
I would say my mother. I think she is the overarching influence on him and the reason Tony is Tony. So I would say, yeah, I mean, Pat had the most influence in trying to get out of that. But I still think Peggy is the one, unfortunately. Yes.
Defines him still to this day. Well, David, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you. No, it's been very enjoyable. Thank you.
Fascinating. Thank
And
you so very much.